Alright, so here we are. Actually, let's start at the beginning. Alright, so here we are. This is the first of the 3 incredible losses after my high. So, yeah, this is going to be a little different because I am covering my losses and what I did wrong instead of what I did right. So, anyway, we're going to start off the game. I played with the white pieces in this first game, and we got d4, knight c6, which is kind of a strange first move, gives me an advantage, but I decided to, I don't really care. Of course, the best move is d5, and then there's some like line here, but I don't want to get into that, so I just played bishop f4, kept it simple there. Now I push there, I go e4, I take all the space in the center I can, comes back like here, and I think, okay, I can go to g3 or e3. And in the end, I decided that g3 didn't really do anything. I thought my bishop was better on e3, which is correct. He goes e6, and I go c4, defending my pawn in the center, and ready to put the knight out to c3 to defend the rest of these pawns. Either way, he goes c6, and I go knight c3. He goes knight f6, and here I probably should have like respected his idea of queen a5, which the idea is, of course, to pin my knight and then start pressuring these pawns with maybe some sort of maybe b4 might have been a better move than what I played. Maybe not, I'm not sure, but anyway, I go with the simple knight f3, which actually is better, and he goes with the queen a5, which is the idea I thought he was going to play, and I go bishop b2, which is, I took some time here, and as you can see, I've been taking a lot of time in this opening. It's move 9, and I'm already down 2 minutes on the clock. This is kind of the issue in this game, was mostly the time usage and the time spend. So I really should work on that. Unfortunate that I messed that up. So my opponent just goes back, and I come out with my bishop, and I'm actually down for a draw here. If he goes queen a5, I will go bishop d2 right back, and I am fine with getting a draw, but my opponent doesn't allow that, and he goes bishop b7, the top engine move. I go bishop b2, ready to castle. My pawns in the center are fine. If he takes here, I can, what can I do? I can just take because the bishop is defended. So he takes here with the pawn, recaptures, and captures like this, and I thought, oh, I must be better here, right? I must be better. So I take. An idea I was thinking about was not to take like that. The idea was mostly really to bring my rook over and start pressuring the queen on this file, and then I'd maybe get something going to this square and win the game like that. Yeah, unfortunately I didn't get that going, and I played this. The way to make that work is, of course, a knight takes, a bishop takes, and then knight takes here, and then I just have a crushing advantage. I don't really mind sacrificing my pawn. Actually, I wouldn't sacrifice my pawn because of b4, so I wouldn't really need to do any of that. I thought I would just be better here. I honestly don't know why I didn't play bishop takes f6, but either way, I recaptured the pawn, castles, rook here, and I'm still better because my pieces are slightly better and his queen is a little offsides. I bring my rook to c1. Of course, I'm threatening knight b5, so my opponent stops it, and I play b3, a little too solid. Again, yeah, if I wanted, I could bring my bishop back to e3 and sack this pawn because the pawn isn't really capturable. But I mean, I didn't do that. And then I would have a great position and I'd probably win the game. Fortunately, I just played b3 and bishop d6, bishop back to e3, queen there hitting my pawn, and bishop d2, which is probably just a bad move, and I shouldn't have played this. It does actually hang the pawn on d5, which is just embarrassing in all honesty, and I shouldn't have done that. He takes, of course, takes, and bishop c4, and I'm trying to get some development, get some compensation for the lost pawn. My opponent goes here, and I'm winning. Again, of course I'm winning. It's obvious, really, because of this check, right? It's super simple. If takes, I get this check, and I'm going to win the queen. So, I mean, I don't know how I didn't see that, really, because that's an easy thing to spot. Like, anyone in their right mind should see that. don't know what I was on that day, the day that I played this game, which was yesterday, and I just kind of disappointed in myself, really, because instead of doing that, I played rook e1, and now I'm losing again. My opponent goes bishop g4, I go bishop e2, a knight here, and I'm winning again with knight takes h4. Knight takes h4 would win the game. Knight takes h4 here would win the game, because after bishop takes, rook takes e2, and then, if, for example, if queen takes h4, which would make a lot of sense, I have queen e1, right? And then I'm putting pressure on this bishop. I have this pin here, and I'm going to play. I'm going to bring my rook down to this 7th rank, and then I'm probably just going to win the game because the rook is pinned. A move here for black would be king here, and then maybe I'd probably play like this and lose all my advantage. But the move is rook c4, and I keep an advantage. I'm probably going to win the game. Yeah. Again, I probably should have seen that. Well, not the entire line, but I should have at least tried knight h4. Instead, I played knight d4, which again loses all my advantage. Bishop takes, knight takes, bishop out, and I go g3, and I don't, like, what am I doing? Like, honestly, what am I doing? Because this is absurd that I missed this. Obviously, the g-pawn is defending that the knight can't go here, right? It's defending this square. So why in the hell would I push it? So then I would lose the control of that square. And then I just resigned. I just resigned here. I didn't want to play this anymore. In all honesty, I was really tired. Yeah, that was the first game. Pretty awful, really, but I mean, I guess we can get into game number 2. Alright, so here we are in game number 2. This game, I played a little better, but still in the end lost because my opponent went insane and totally beat me easily. d4, knight f6, bishop here, c5, c3, e6, there, and knight f6. And this is an interesting opening experiment for me, right? Okay, so what I'm trying to see here, is I realize, you know what, I don't have any like cutting edge theory in any of these lines, right? So why not just play whatever I want? And that was kind of my mindset for this game, really, because I thought that, okay, I don't know how to play the lines. I don't really care. If I want to learn how to play the lines, I should like start right now. So I just try something random that I don't really know any theory about, and I think I get a pretty decent position off the bat. He goes here, and I go d5, and I get back into a position that I actually know what to do in. My opponent goes here, and I go queen b6, which follows the ideas for black in these types of positions, where the queen comes out normally and attacks this pawn, and if queen b3, I get c4, and I get some pressure after takes. My rook gets opened, and he has to push bishop back, and I can advance with my b pawn. Of course, that is pretty taxing on my computer. Yeah, so we're just gonna make a quick cut here, and we're back. Okay, so yeah, queen b6, pretty average, and my opponent goes knight e2, giving me up the pawn on b2, but I don't take it. The reason why, okay, so normally, a lot of the times there's some lines in London and these types of positions where you can actually just sacrifice this pawn, and it's not the end of the world, because after here, white can get some like serious compensation. Like you can see, okay, the reason it's so bad is that it's not, I mean, okay, well, let's say there's a different way. Okay, so if I was up a clean pawn, this would be -1, right? Now, the reason why it's minus 0.38 or whatever is because my opponent has just an insane amount of compensation for the pawn, and that's just not a line that I would like to go into. So I just didn't take it, and I just played bishop b7 instead, developing my bishop very simply and not wanting to waste any time because of the last game taking so much time out of me and my inherent loss. So my opponent goes castles, giving me up the pawn again, and this time I decide to take it, which is the best move. And my opponent goes e4, striking back in the center, which is kind of what you're supposed to do. But my opponent did it a little strangely, and I go queen a3, which pressures this pawn with the pin to the bishop, and I'm able to attack here. Just turn off feedback. Able to attack here and here with less issues. My opponent goes takes, and I take back with the knight, just losing the game on the spot. Yeah. The reason I took back with the knight is, of course, to pressure the pawn, but this is the wrong option. The reason why this is the wrong option is because of knight c4, which is pretty ridiculous, and my queen doesn't have a square. Yeah, I missed this during the game, but my queen is actually just trapped here, and I have to sacrifice a piece because I'm able to attack the other queen. So takes, and I'm just down. Well, I'm actually not down material because I'm able to pick up back a pawn, but my opponent has 3 pawns. I have 3 pawns for the piece, which is normally losing, and this is just kind of depressing. It's just kind of depressing to play this position. This is already resignable, but I thought I should play a couple more moves and, you know, just keep trying to make some progress. My opponent, of course, goes knight into b5, to, attacking the square on c7, and I quickly go e5. The reason e5 is the reason I went e5 is because, of course, if I were for to say like king d7, which is an option, then knight e takes h4. I mean d4. Knight e takes d4. Takes, and this position is pretty awful. The reason why is because my king is so out in the open. My king will never ever get to safety. I would have to, well, what I have to do first, I'd have to play a6 to stop the knight from going back. So that's one move, and then I have to go rook d8. That's another move, and then I have to go king e8, and that would be all the way to get my king to safety. But my opponent is not going to allow that. That is 3 moves. That is too much time, and yeah, this is just a completely losing position, and I really. So that's why I didn't go for d7, and I instead just sacked the exchange because I thought, okay, I might be getting 2 pieces, right? This knight is trapped. He can't leave. And in the meantime, I'm gonna move my bishop out. I'm gonna bring my king over and take the knight, right? Very simple, very simple. Like, I'm gonna just do that. So my opponent goes here, and I go bishop d7, takes, and knight takes d4. Now, I decided that the best way to do it here is just to start moving my king over king c8, two squares away from taking the knight. My opponent goes rook c8, rook c1, which is probably the best move, adding some pressure on this pawn, and I march 1 square forward to b8. Takes, rook d7, and I go bishop d8, which is a massive mistake, but it's actually very hard to see why. The reason why I went bishop d8, of course, is because, 1, my opponent is attacking my bishop and trying to bring his knight back to c7, right? Very simple. So I go bishop d8 because I want to stop the knight from going back to c7. I want to save my bishop, right? Very simple, very straightforward. Bishop d8 and rook takes c6. And I realize here, I feel so bad. I mean, I just realized, of course, that I can't actually take the knight, which was my whole plan. I can't take the knight because if I take the knight, then I get checkmated in the corner, which is just absurd that my opponent has this, but it's just kind of awful, you know? I mean, I got into a bad position out of the start, and now I'm kind of paying for it. So I go rook e8 because I have nothing better to do, and simply my opponent goes h4, and I just capture the pawn because what else am I supposed to do? Opponent brings the knight out, I go check there, and I take the pawn, which lets my opponent play checkmate in 2 with the very simple knight a6 and rook c8 checkmate. Yeah, so this is the second loss out of 3, and yeah, it's kind of depressing to go out and go through all your old games, especially the ones that you lost, but I mean, at the very end, we will be letting up on the light note with the game that I actually won. So let's get up to the next game. And here we are. This is the final game of the 3 apocalyptic losses that brought me down from 2034, I believe, down to 2009. So in this game, of course, I'm playing down. I'm playing this man Tuberna 66, who is 1958, and I thought, and so I go d4, and my opponent takes time on the first move. For some reason, my opponent takes like 9 seconds and plays the move d5, which is confusing to me. And I was honestly already kind of weirded out by this, but I mean, people do this all the time, so I go with my simple London. My opponent plays 4 seconds to play knight f6, and I'm already kind of in shock because this is weird. You either normally in the London you play like a move, you can play another move quickly. It's very straightforward, the game plan. Maybe he was just deciding what to play. I mean, there's a lot of options. He can bring the bishop out. He can go c5. I mean, he has many things he can do. So I could just go e3, the main line. My opponent goes g6 with another 4 seconds. I go c4, another like 4 seconds for a very simple move, bishop g7. I mean, I don't understand. Like, what? What are you doing? I go knight c3, very simple, and c5 with another 4 seconds. Like, what was this? What is this? And I'm already very weirded out. I am very confused. I already think that this guy is cheating. If I'm being honest, I think that this guy is cheating already. dc5 is the best move, and I go h4 instead, which I know was kind of a bad move idea, simply h5, but I mean, I know I shouldn't have done that. Can we turn off feedback, please? I don't like these green lines. I know I shouldn't have done that, but what am I supposed to do? I already think I'm playing a cheater, right? So I'm like, okay, let's see. I'm gonna play h4. I'm gonna make sure that he's cheating before I like send like a report or whatever. So I play h4, and my opponent takes with another like 4 or 5 seconds, which is just like the weirdest thing, and it is like the best move. Of course, I play queen takes, and my opponent goes knight c6. Apparently ed4 is better, but I honestly didn't really see any benefit to giving myself an IQP, and I didn't really want to, so I just didn't, and I instead just took back the queen. My opponent goes knight c6, another 4 seconds, by the way, queen d1, and queen a5, and as you can tell, the time is very, very consistent, and now I am 100% sure here. I know for certain that my opponent is cheating. So I take here, and my opponent goes knight takes d5, which gets a brilliant move after 4 seconds of thought. And I go knight e2. Of course, if I take the knight, then he would give me this check, and I would be losing my queen. So I didn't want to do that. Of course, yeah, I am sure that I'm playing a cheater, but at the same time, I mean, I still would like to have some time at the end to stall, and maybe my report would go through in time. So knight takes d5, I go knight e2, takes, king e2, I am losing. Speaking of which, all of those moves were spent in like a decent amount of time. Like he took, my bad. He took with 7 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Like every move. It's kind of blatant. It's kind of blatant at this point. So I go f3. The idea is to run my king to f2. I might be able to survive over there. My opponent goes g5, which is just so confusing to me. And my opponent spent 4 seconds on this move again. But that is just like shocking, because I feel like this is the type of move that I think is trying to throw off the engine, trying to throw off the percent accuracy. This move g5. So of course I take. My opponent goes e5, another inaccuracy, another move that I think is trying to throw off the engine, because it is actually the third best move at this high level depth. So I thought, okay, my opponent's trying to throw off the accuracy, because I know for a fact that this guy is cheating. I am 100% sure. I've already put in my report. I'm sure this guy is cheating, and I go back to g3, rook g8, another big mistake. I guess I really don't understand, because this is also the 4 second, but it's another move to throw off the accuracy, I guess. I'm not sure. And I go e4, which is a blunder, because of course bishop takes e4 played in around 7 seconds. Rook h3, knight there, and my opponent just comes for all this, and of course is gonna go long castles with check with the mate in 11. Long castle is not a hard move to find, because after rook d3 takes, my opponent goes rook d8, which is the best move, and then I go here, and this is the part where I'm like, there's no way this is a real person, because of course there's always like a part of you that's like, okay, maybe I put too much like thought this is a cheater. Maybe I'm like really salty. I don't know. Maybe I'm like really tilted, but I might be wrong. Unfortunately, my opponent kind of shows me what he's doing, because instead of taking my queen, like any normal person just takes the queen, my opponent decides to play the second best move and go for my rook. What are you doing? This it's blatant. It's just blatant. It's just blatant. So if you can't tell, I lose in the end. Yeah, this is just blatant cheating. I don't understand. Chess.com hasn't banned this guy yet, which is kind of shocking. But this is it's just incredibly blatant. I'm not going to show the rest of the game, because this is it's just simple. I of course try to like stalemate myself, and then I try to like stall to maybe see if Chess.com will ban this guy, and spoiler alert, it doesn't, and I lose. So yeah, I'm still sure this guy is cheating. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but whatever, I don't really mind. Anyway, so let's get on to the next game, the final game. I know this is the third apocalyptic loss, but maybe we can do something a bit lighthearted with a nice little win to end off the game, end off the video. And here we are back at the final game versus Mr. Daverino 3-2-2. Yeah, so this is a game where I got back a couple of my points, and I think I played pretty well in this game. The accuracy doesn't show that. It shows me at 80%, which is pretty poor for my level. Normally around 83, 84 is average, but either way, let's get into it. If I can get to the right thing. Sakaro Khan with the move bishop f5 inserted, and h4, which is the tall variation, which is a very interesting idea. I don't think I've covered a tall on this channel before. Basically, the idea is if I play e6, my bishop gets trapped, because after this, there's nothing for my bishop, and I would lose the game. I've played enough Karo Khan to know what to do here, and I of course play the best move h6, which is, well, actually it's not the best move. h5 is the best move, but I don't like h5, so I play h6. My opponent goes g4, I go here, making him play f3, and then I come back to h7, which is the whole idea of h6. My opponent goes e6, and I have studied this line a bunch, and the move here is queen d6. I know this for a fact. The reason why is because I don't actually mind losing castling rights, and I'm just getting a little bit of development. I'm saying he's a little overextended on the king side, and I'm going to start targeting these pawns. My bishop is bad, but I'm going to bring my knight out. I'm going to play c5. I'm going to play e5. I'm bring my rook out, and hopefully I'll just try to win quickly, and maybe I'll be able to bring my bishop out in the future, but for now the bishop kind of sucks, especially this bishop. So my opponent, of course, takes on f7, takes, and plays this move f4, which is a move I haven't seen before. And I have to put this into my notes because it's actually very reasonable. The idea is, of course, to prevent my queen from going to g3, but most people here play some rook h3. Well, rook h3 messes up, but I mean, there's a lot of other things that you can play besides f4, and my opponent goes for the f4. So I'll have to put this into my notes, and I'll have to get some stuff about it. Best move here is knight f6. I don't play knight f6, I play bishop e4. The idea of bishop e4 is pretty simple. What I want him to play rook h3. That's what I want. I want him to play rook h3 pretty badly, because then I'm going to get some pressure on these pawns, and I thought I was going to play queen e6 after this, maybe. And I thought, okay, I'm lining up some stuff against the king. I could make this work, right? Yeah, it's a bad move. It's a bad move. My opponent goes knight f3, which is the best move. I thought after knight f3 I'd go queen e6 anyway, and then I'd put pressure on this pawn, I'd put pressure on the king, and I'd probably get some sort of advantage out of the opening. But instead I realized after queen e6, my opponent probably has this knight e5 move, and I don't really want to put my king back on e8 and then just start pressuring from that. So I instead go with knight f6, which targets the pawn here in another way. My opponent goes knight e5 check anyway, but then I realize, okay, if my king goes back to e8, these two squares, okay, if I can put squares on, these squares are covered, right? My bishop is covering this square. My opponent's probably going to go knight c3 afterwards and attack my bishop, and I'm going to try and go like knight d7 and trade off the knight, right? I'm going to be able to do that because I have time and I have superior development than my opponent. Of course, my opponent has more space, but space is not everything. So I go king e8, and my opponent goes rook h1. Yeah, oh my bad, not knight c3. My opponent would go rook h1. Sorry. Yeah, it's been some time since I played this game, a couple hours. I forgot all my thoughts, and I go knight d7, which has the idea of trading off the knight. Until I realized, of course, I can't take the knight. I can't take the knight at all because I would lose to a fork. So really, knight d7 was a mistake. What I should have played if I ever wanted to trade off the knight was knight f d7. That would be a way to trade off the knight, but that's also not a good move because, of course, going back is wrong, and I would be stunting the development of my knight. So I don't want to do that. So then knight b7, knight c3, of course, trying to get my bishop, and I go queen b4 with a simple idea. The idea is easy. I want to pin this knight. I want to get my queen out, but more importantly, I want to make sure that my queen wouldn't be there to be forked after I take the knight here, right? So my opponent goes h3, and I go queen a5, which are the best moves. I think h3 is probably, no, a3, not h3. a3 is probably the best move just from a practical standpoint because the idea is simply to play b4 and stop my queen from pinning this knight so then his knight can take my bishop. It makes a lot of sense. So anyway, this happens, and my opponent goes b4, which I think is very, very smart, and I go queen c7, trying to get to a better square for my queen, where it will not get pinned after I take the knight. My opponent goes g5, starting to cause chaos, and I decide to keep with the trend and take the knight here. And now my opponent has this difficult decision to make of which pawn does he capture the knight with. If he captures with this pawn, then maybe I can get my rook on the d file. I can start pressuring down this file, and it's interesting. It's very interesting here. If he would take with this pawn, I could go d4 in some lines. Maybe d4 doesn't work immediately, but it's interesting. It causes some problems. Oh, the reason why it doesn't work actually is because of, well, either ef or gf, but I guess gf takes. And then I guess, oh yeah, FG, and he gets this fork down here, and I would lose the game. So I guess not d4, but either way, I'm losing, right? I am losing by 2, right? But instead of just crawling down and just dying, I instead try to make it work. The best move here is shocking. The best move here is trying to sacrifice my knight with h takes g6. And after this, I mean, I don't know why I would ever play this in a million years, but whatever. I don't play it because I'm not insane. Instead, I just move my knight back like the human that I am, and my opponent goes e6, so I go knight b6. Of course, the computer still wants to sacrifice the knight. The computer wants bishop f5, right? Yeah, bishop f5, which is just absurd. I would never play this. No one would ever play this, right? Because you're sacrificing knight for like no reason, right? If you want any winning chances in a game, you can't just lose your pieces for no reason. I would rather try to keep them on the board. So instead I go knight b6, and my opponent has to take on e4. This is the whole idea of my opponent's play. If my opponent doesn't take on e4, then I mean I probably am fine, right? Because then I save my bishop, and I can just relax with maybe even a better position because of how scrunched back and how overextended his pawns are. All his pieces are on like the first rank except for the knight, and 3 of my pieces are out. So in technical terms, I am better, but after knight takes e4, d4, my opponent would get very, very good activity because of my isolated pawn here, my weak king. He'd probably go queen h5 and get in on f7, and that is just a terrible, terrible position to end up in. Instead, my opponent misses this and goes queen h5 immediately, giving me the advantage after the simple move g6, which I'm sure that my opponent missed. And that is why he had to take on e4, because now he does not have a chance to. Because after queen back, bishop f5, I am just simply better, and it's obvious to see why. I'm gonna develop my bishop like this. I'm going to bring my rook over like this, and then I'm probably just going to win with the development. And his bishop can't really get out here. His bishop here would be blocked by this. And then this bishop is probably his best piece because it can go to this diagonal, it can go down this diagonal, but it's still bad. And he's going to castle queenside, but then I might not even allow him to castle queenside. He has this weakness on c2. Everything is like losing for white. If he had taken my bishop, I would be lost. I would be completely lost. But instead, I'm now in the driver's seat. So my opponent goes bishop b2, and I go rook h7 with a very simple idea. I see, okay, if I go for another idea like let's say hg, I was worried about knight takes pawn with the discovered attack on the rook. But actually this is fine. This is completely fine. After knight takes, bishop takes rook, I can take here, and then I'm actually doing like better. My opponent can't take here. I just want to illustrate that because queen h4 would be a fork on the king and the bishop. So of course my opponent can't do that, and I'm actually just better here with the exchange sacrifice. I didn't see that, so I went for the very simple rook h7 with the idea of playing bishop g7 in the future and making sure that my rook was not pinned. I was not in the line of fire of the bishop on b2. So my opponent goes here, and now I'm thinking, okay, well, I see that I want to play d4, right? I want to play d4 because that would win material. I could also take on c2, c2, right? But then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, if I take on c2, let's just play the moves. Then I thought, okay, well, what does he play? I thought he plays this move, and I thought I was almost losing here because after bishop d3, queen d3, I thought I was much worse, right? Because he's threatening queen g6 and is going to win my rook. So I have to play rook g7, and then gh here, h7 here, and then takes with check here, and I lose, right? The line the computer shows is ridiculous. It's again sacrificing the rook because this, I mean, I guess I get something. Maybe I can try to force a repetition, but this is inhuman. No one would ever play this, and I of course don't. So I don't take on c2. I think, okay, I have better ways to do this. Let's see, how do I make this d4 work? Okay, I can play rook a8, or I can play bishop g7 and try to defend the square, so then I can play d4. And I thought, okay, rook a8, what's the issue with rook a8? Okay, rook a8, my opponent has lots of ways to stop it. My opponent can go here, for example, and just save all his pawns, and then I don't know, and nothing is really going on. I feel like bishop g7 is just a better move in general because I'm getting my bishop out, and my bishop is going to be much more active than my rook. I would rather get my rook out after my king's behind it, so I instead go bishop g7, which is very lucky actually, because if I went rook d8, there's another reason why it doesn't work, and the reason why it doesn't work is because of rook d8, my opponent has the crazy move knight b5, which is wild because after takes he gets this, and this would be checkmate, except I have to block with the knight, ed7 with check, bishop back, and then I'm almost lost here. This is terrible. This is really bad. I think that this position is probably just like much better for white, and the computer agrees. So I didn't see that, and I'm honestly very lucky that I didn't play rook d8 because I might have lost the game. But instead bishop g7, and my opponent just simply resigns the game, which gives me another win. I don't know why he would resign. You gotta play this on. I mean, I'm not even up a pawn. I just have a lot of development. I mean, you gotta keep going here, but I guess my opponent didn't like his chances or whatever, so he just quit the game, which is always nice. And I won a very nice game versus my opponent to end off the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys found that instructional. Yeah, good evening and good night.